95.3, I'm Chaz Kangas, and joining me right now, I have a very special guest. You know him as the voice and spirit of Crow during the Sci-Fi Channel years of Mystery Science Theater 3000. You know him as the writer of the seasonal classic, Superpowered Revenge Christmas. You know him as one-third of Rifftrax, who will be live riffing Hobgoblins coming up on June 11th, and Amityville, The Evil Escapes on October 21st. Off of a very recently, very successfully funded Kickstarter, Rifftrax's own Bill Corbett. Bill, how you doing today?
Good. Hey, Chaz. How you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you. So now we're coming on these two big shows this year. It's going to be, if my math is correct, the 31st and 32nd ever Rifftrax live shows. And in that time, there's been such a tremendously growing and thriving fan base for the art of live riffing and what you've been doing at Rifftrax. So over the course of these past, 30 shows, what's it been like seeing the response and if the fan base has been changing or the reception changing in any sort of way?
Oh, it's been amazing, and we all feel very lucky and blessed. Not to be too cliche about it, but I mean, this didn't necessarily have to play out this way, and we're very lucky that people are still into this. Because we did the first live show back in 2009, which was Plan 9 from Outer Space, the Ed Wood classic, with a little trepidation, is this going to fly at all? Is it going to work? And we were very nervous because it was really live, old-fashioned TV. So no room for big mistakes. But now we're 30-something shows later, and people still seem to be into it, and we get them funded. So I don't know what to say except thanks to people who still enjoy what we do. It's a real honor.
Nice. Has the writing process changed at all much between the Plan 9 riffing and now?
Yeah, I think we have learned to tool them a little bit more for live audiences, because the way we do it is we do it in front of a live audience in a theater, usually in Nashville, Tennessee, which we wound up in just because there's a production company we work with there, and it's easier to bring us there than the whole, 24 of them somewhere else. So we do it in a theater in Nashville, and then it's beamed to movie theaters around the country. So we have learned to just, make the jokes a little more friendly for live audiences, meaning mostly make them less dense, make them a little snappier, and leave room for reactions, give people some time to laugh and listen to the next thing without just, speeding into the next joke, which, we're good little comedians, and we have a high work ethic, so we try to give a lot of, give people a lot of material, but at times we've done that almost to the detriment of the humor, because we go from one joke to another, and it's people need a little breathing room and a little room to hear the next cue. So that's something we've learned.
Yeah, and it definitely feels really organic when you make the joke and that back and forth with the audience and just that mutual energy happening. There's really nothing like it.
Yeah, it's really great. And the other thing I guess we've learned, which is something that is true of all live comedy, is that there is no predicting what people are going to like or not like. I mean, we're lucky that we get pretty good reaction for most of our jokes, but every now and then something absolutely falls flat. And then it's that old Johnny Carson thing of just almost being amused at how badly it bombed. And if we're smart and sharp enough in that moment, we can usually make a good joke of how badly it bombed in that tradition. And then there's things that people laugh at from the movie that we didn't even really see coming. There's a moment in the movie itself, or one joke that we thought was kind of a throwaway commentary suddenly gets a big wave of reaction. So that, to me, is super exciting part of it and makes it worth doing in itself.
Nice. So with these, you got the classics, Hobgoblins and the fourth Amityville film, rather, coming up. How do you decide which movies it is that you riff?
Well, for the live shows, we try to factor in a bunch of things. mostly like some combination of, well, will enough people sort of recognize this or be attracted to it on its face that will be, that'll be something of a draw. But I'll be honest, I mean, we have tried to crack the formula of what works and what doesn't, and we're still sorting through, like, what did that one really hit and that one did not? But there's a couple of very practical factors. One is, can we get the rights? I mean, there are things that we would love to do that we just can't get a hold of. Either we just don't have permission, or it is way, way too expensive to get the rights to. It basically eat our budget and then some. And then there's other little factors, like, does it look clear and good enough for to be beamed to all these theaters? Like, if it's just this murky old piece of garbage that was filmed badly and has aged worse, like, it might not look great on a big, large screen across the, going across the airwaves. There's a whole bunch of other things. We try to look for a little variety. Here and there, we've been peppering it with old MST3K titles like Hobgoblins as they become available, just to take another crack at it. When we do that, we guarantee, like, it's a whole new 100% rewritten riff for better or worse.
Speaking of Hobgoblins, what was it like revisiting it some 2 decades after you introduced it to an entire nationwide audience?
Well, we're still we're still not really in the thick of it yet, because we're still a couple of months off from the show, so we won't really dive in earnest until a little bit later from now. But previewing it, just like deciding, do we want to take another crack at this? It was a bit of a shocker in memory, like, wow, this really was cheesy. And the only hesitation I had is that Hobgoblin is a little bit like, it's a little bit of a comedy in intention here and there, but it's not good comedy at all, of course. But that is something that, it's usually a strike against a movie for us. Like, if it's already trying to be funny, and then we wind up making a bunch of jokes along the lines of, boy, that wasn't funny, it just makes us seem like jerks. It's just very sour, and it's hard to make fun of yourself. But Hobgoblins has enough other stuff that we can kind of work with.
Yeah, it is pretty wild, too, especially with something like Hobgoblins. I remember a couple years back being in a Barnes & Noble and seeing a DVD of an unriffed Hobgoblins, like, on shelves, and realizing that the impact of something, reintroducing and that spreading. So that's sort of a reintroduction permanence in mind. At the live events or when they're beamed to theaters, have you ever heard back from anyone involved in any of the movies you've riffed?
Oh, yeah. I mean, especially in, of course, the more recent movies we've done. We re-riffed Time Chasers, which was another movie we did back on MST3K, and that I think it might have been for the whole run of MST3K, but certainly during the sci-fi years, that was the newest movie we had ever done. Like, at the time, it had only been filmed like a couple of years before that in Vermont, of all places. And I think at the time, like, some of the cast asked, "Wait, can we come be on the show?" And we were like, "That's probably not a great idea." I don't know, for all kinds of, we didn't really know how to handle that. It's like, how do you work somebody? But we've gotten a little more comfortable with that. So for that show, we actually invited the director and some of the cast members who were still, relatively young, to come join us in Nashville, and they gave, they like signed autographs, and they it was very thrilling for the people who were there, because a lot of people are very understanding, as we are, generally speaking, of like low budget, not great movies. It's like, hey, it's like, at least you did something creative and you tried. So our fans there were just thrilled to meet them and, hang out with them. Here and there, it's gotten a little less comfortable. Like, somebody just takes offense, but usually it doesn't get that far if it's a contemporary movie and somebody doesn't want us to do it and they own it. Well, we just can't do it. We can't just take it. And even for things like The Room with Tommy Wiseau, he really didn't want us to do The Room until we kind of struck a money deal with him. And then he was like, okay, we can do it now. Like, all right, Tommy.
Yeah, I remember interviewing Tommy around the release of that and the Tribeca screening you guys did of it. And yeah, he is a pretty interesting take and perspective on the art of it and it all. So
boy, does he have! I mean, and really, I don't think he knew what we were doing for most of it. I would be very surprised if he ever saw it. But his line going around in interviews was, "I approve of it 40%." But I don't know what. It's just very mysterious. Like, okay, you don't want to get to a full 50, but so. But we did, we dealt with some of the other people like Greg and, just some of the other people who were in the movie who were more victims of the room than anything. But it's a nice bunch. Tommy's just a mysterious figure, and what he really needed ultimately was to be shown that we were willing to pay quite a bit for it, and we were willing to, so.
Which is at the heart of all cinematic achievements. So.
Yeah. A lot of it, no doubt.
Yeah, because when I interviewed him, my editor was not familiar with Wiseau or The Room. So when I submitted the first thing of a straight interview format, he sent it back to me and said, "What the hell is this? Did you proofread this before you sent it?" And I'm like, "That's just how he talks. I'm not. If I misquote him, it's going to sound really like it's not him and that I made it up." So that wound up being shifted from an interview to a piece about a conversation with Tommy Wiseau about it. So. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, part of the fascination with him is just how his weird mind works, and even how his speech and his way of expressing things work. I mean, it's not just a problem with the English language. It's a weird point of view.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. One of a kind. Just like the two films you got coming up this year at Rifftrax. Again, June 11th in theaters everywhere through Fathom Events. Rifftrax will be riffing Hobgoblins. Then on October 21st, make your Halloween plans early. Amityville, The Evil Escapes. Right now, of course, the Kickstarter is still going on. Congrats again on it being 100% funded. And backers can still get involved and get plenty of Rifftrax goodies, including, after the screenings, copies of the films, correct?
Yes, indeed. Yeah. That's one of the good things when we don't do a big studio film where we're just get licensed to do it that night and nothing else. We've done that a few times, with Starship Troopers. But with these, you can actually get a recording of the entire event. So we really like that. So.
Excellent. And finally, in addition to the live Rifftrax shows, there's plenty of the riffings available on rifftrax.com. Is there any riff that you're particularly proud of that you think is really funny or you just really like a lot that maybe a little less heralded you'd love to be in front of more eyes and ears?
Oh, boy, good question. I mean, I don't know if it's less heralded, but I am extremely fond of Birdemic, the movie, which we did as a live show, which is as bad a movie as you can imagine, but it has such a cracked point of view. And if you're not familiar with it, it's basically somebody's tribute to Hitchcock's The Birds, but it has a very weird subplot about Silicon Valley business dealings that is hilarious to us because it just seems like people are talking about getting, stock options and discounts and all that. Meanwhile, there's a big plague of birds and a little bit of an eco propaganda, but very ham-handedly done. The filmmaker James Nguyen, that's a Vietnamese last name, it's Nguyen Nguyen, has a whole bunch of movies on our site that are, if you just take them all as a series, are fascinating. But I would begin with Birdemic because that is the funniest.
I'm glad you said that because that's actually the Rifftrax thing I indoctrinate people with. The first thing I always ever show them. So,
good.
Yeah, it's a very accessible. And then,
it's a funny experience on its own. It's one. I wouldn't say this about all of our stuff or even most of our stuff, but it's one of the movies where, if you watch it on its own, it's hilarious. But then once you've done that, come back and listen to us talk about it.
Yeah. And then actually, before I moved away from New York, I threw a Jack and Jill party. Watching the rip of that. So.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That is cool.
Yeah. Well, once again, Bill, thank you so much. Everyone can follow more Rifftrax things at Rifftrax and at Bill Corbett. Congratulations again, and I'm looking very forward to these riffs.
Thank you, Chaz. Nice talking to you.